Welcome to your next to last unit of the year. This is on area, volume, and surface area. Today we're specifically talking about area. And we're going to be talking about area of several different shapes today. Rectangles, squares, parallelograms, and triangles. Now some of this I know is a review from elementary school, but some of this would also be new. All of the formulas you see up here I will give you throughout this unit. You don't need to memorize them, but they will be on your tests. I will give them to you. All right, so we're going to start with a review here of rectangles and squares. So for the area of a rectangle or square, it is simply the length times the width. Usually we will see it written like this, length times width. And by the way, I use capital letters for that, even though we typically use lowercase in math. But if I put a lowercase l, it tends to look like a 1, so a little confusing. So length times width, or sometimes you'll see it as BH, which is base times height. So let's take a look at this as a quick review. We have a rectangle here with 10 inches and 8 inches. One of the things I really want to stress throughout this entire unit is that you are following these steps right here, even though I know this is a very basic problem. So step 1, you're going to write the formula. So you look at your shape, it's a rectangle. What's my formula? Area equals length times width. Next, step 2, plug in the values. So you look at your shape and you're plugging in whatever is the length and the width. So area equals 10 times 8. Now keep in mind it would not matter if you wrote 8 times 10. That's fine as well. Step 3, of course, is to solve and label. So 10 times 8, of course, is 80. And by labeling, we need the unit of measurement. Well, I see this was in inches. And because a rectangle is 2 dimensions, we label it squared, 80 inches squared. You could also write out the word square if you want to. That's your final answer. All right, moving on to a square. Again, we're going to follow these steps. Step 1, write our formula. Same formula as a rectangle, because a square is just a type of rectangle. Length times width. Now if it's a square, you know all the sides are the exact same length. So 3, and we see these little lines here that tell us that it's congruent. 3 times 3. Step 3, we'll solve and label. But what do we label it? It doesn't say inches or centimeters. So here, this is really important. If it doesn't have a specific unit of measurement, you still have to label. We would call it units squared, or you could say square units. Oops. All right, now let's take a look at this, a little bit different. It says find the width of the rectangle below. So notice we're not asked to find the area, we're finding the width. They've given us the area right here. They've told us the length, and we have to find the width. Well, we're still going to do the exact same thing. We're going to write our formula. It's a rectangle, so area equals what? Length times width. All right? Step 2 tells us to plug in any values that we have. Well, in this case, we know the area is 24, equals, we know our length is 8. It's our W that we don't know, the width. Hopefully when you're looking at this, you realize, oh, this is just a one-step equation. W, in this case, of course, stands for width, but it's also your variable. So, draw your handy-dandy line, do the inverse operation, divide by 8 on both sides, right? And we find that our width is equal to what? Well, 24 divided by 8, of course, is 3. Notice this was in centimeters. Okay, remember, we're not finding the area here, we're only finding the width. So I don't need that little square there, that only goes for the area. This is my final answer. My width is equal to 3 centimeters. So at this point, you've learned how to find the area of a rectangle and the area of a square. Again, this was review from elementary school. We've learned how to find a missing side. Again, use your formula, plug it in and solve. Now let's talk about the area of a parallelogram. Whoops, I think I skipped a slide. There we go. Area of a parallelogram. This might be a new shape for you on finding area. So the area of a parallelogram is equal to the base times the height, or we can just write it like this, of course. So here's a parallelogram. I think it kind of looks like a rectangle that's been sort of smushed. So let's take a look here. We've got 6 inches, 4 inches, and 5 inches. So hopefully you're noticing right away, there's 3 numbers, Miss Mac, and we're only doing the base times the height. Which ones do I use? All right, well, let's back up here. Step 1, write our formula. Area equals base times height. Step 2, plug in our values. Okay, area equals the base. Well, that seems pretty obvious, right? The base is this bottom line right here, so 6. Okay. But the question is, which number is the height? Is it the 5 or the 4? I want you to think about this for a second. I'm sure all of you at some point have been to the doctor, right? And they measure you when you first get there. They look for your height. So when you go to the doctor and they ask for your height, do they have you stand like this at a diagonal? Probably not, right? So that 5, see how it's at a diagonal? That's not going to be our height. When you go to the doctor and they measure your height, they say stand straight up and down, right? Well, take a look at that dotted line in there, that 4. That is straight up and down. That's our height. 6 times 4. Step 3, solve and label. Well, 6 times 4 is 24. This was inches. We're finding the area, so squared. Let's try another problem with a parallelogram. All right, here is another parallelogram. First, we're going to write our formula. So area equals base times height. I don't really need that dot there, right? I can just write the letters right next to one another. Okay. Step 2, plug in the values. Well, I haven't labeled anything yet, so let's take a look here. Let's say this was a 10. This was perhaps a 5, and this was a 2. All right. So actually, I'm gonna do this a little bit different. Let's put our 10 up here. Okay. So let's plug in step 2. What is our base? Well, normally I think of the base as being on the bottom. Okay. I notice there's not a label there, but I notice this 10. That line is of course parallel to this line, so I know that my base is 10. Okay, which one is your height, the 5 or the 2? Again, when you go to the doctor, do you stand like this to be measured? Of course not, you stand straight up and down, so it's the 2. Solve, 10 times 2, 20. We don't have a measurement here, it doesn't say centimeters or feet or meters, so what do? Units, 20 units squared, or 20 square units. That's our final answer. Now, I want to point out something to you about that dotted line here. Erase some of this extra stuff in here. All right, so I have that height line on the inside, and I think, yeah, I did that on this one too. But I want you to note, we could also have our line on the outside. That could also be our height. This would be a 2. For that matter, I could have it right inside. It's still 2. So don't be surprised if you see it on the inside, on the outside, in the middle. It could be coming up from this end. Okay, that would still be the height of 2. All right, so here we're gonna try one last example where they've given us the area, they've given us one of the measurements, and we have to find the height. All right, so do you remember what the first step is? Write the formula. It's a parallelogram, so area equals base times height. Okay, step 2, plug in your values. Well, I know the area is 36. I know the base is 9. What I don't know is the height. So we're talking this space right here. That's my unknown value. Okay, x. Or again, remember, it could be right there too. All right, 36 equals 9h. This is a one-step equation that you guys are experts at by now. Draw your line. Divide by 9. What you do to one side of the equation, you have to do to the other. 4 is equal to your height. Now, of course, I don't want to leave it like that. Do I have a unit of measurement? I do. It was inches. So 4 inches is our height. All right, at this point, you have learned area for a rectangle, a square, a parallelogram, and you've learned what to do if there's a missing side. You're going to take a formative check at this point. Good luck. I know you'll do great.